The training facility aboard the Galactic Defense Station hummed with the quiet efficiency that marked all Corvani military installations. Commander Zeth Ka reviewed the morning's agenda on his datapad, his 4 eyes scanning the schedule with practiced precision. Today would be different from the usual weapons drills and tactical simulations. Today they would observe something the humans called hand-to-hand combat. The concept still puzzled most of the station's personnel. Why would any civilized species resort to striking each other with bare appendages when energy weapons could eliminate threats from considerable distances? The humans had arrived 6 months ago as part of the new interspecies military exchange program, and their methods continued to baffle even the most experienced galactic defense officers. Commander, his aide, Lieutenant Vex Rowe, approached with the characteristic clicking gait of his species. The human instructor has arrived for the demonstration. Zeth Ka looked up from his pad. Through the transparent aluminum viewing wall, he could see the training floor below. A single human stood in the center of the padded area, dressed in what appeared to be simple gray clothing. The human looked unremarkable by any standard Zeth Ka could identify. Medium height by human measures, average build, with the typical pale skin and brown hair common to their species. Nothing about the creature suggested any particular threat or capability. His name? Zeth Ka asked. Sergeant Marcus Chen, according to the files. He has been designated as a close-quarters combat specialist by Human Command. Vex Rowe consulted his own device. His record shows extensive experience in something called mixed martial arts and various human military conflicts. The commander nodded slowly. The observation deck was filling with officers from multiple species, all curious about this demonstration. The humans had earned grudging respect for their tactical thinking and stubborn persistence in the field, but their insistence on primitive combat techniques remained a source of amusement throughout the fleet. Attention! The facility's communication system crackled to life. This is Sergeant Chen. I understand there's been some curiosity about human close-quarters combat methods. Today I'll be demonstrating some basic techniques and explaining their practical applications in modern warfare. Zeth Ka activated the comm system from the observation deck. Sergeant, we appreciate your willingness to share your expertise. However, many of us are unclear on the practical value of striking with bare hands when energy weapons are readily available. A sound emerged from the human that Zeth Ka had learned was called laughter. Fair question, Commander. Sometimes technology fails. Sometimes enemies get too close for ranged weapons. Sometimes you need to subdue rather than kill. And sometimes the human's voice carried a hint of something that made several officers in the observation deck shift uncomfortably. The situation requires a more personal touch. The human moved to a control panel and activated several training drones. The mechanical devices, each about the size of a small fighter craft, hovered silently around the training area. Their sensors would record every movement for later analysis. I'll start with some basic striking techniques, Chen announced. He approached one of the training stations, which held various practice equipment. Among them stood a standard galactic defense training post, constructed from reinforced polymer materials designed to withstand energy weapon impacts during calibration exercises. What happened next would be analyzed and discussed in military academies for decades to come. The human's posture changed. The casual, almost relaxed stance transformed into something that registered as predatory even to alien senses. His movements became fluid, controlled, like a piece of machinery designed for a single, specific purpose. Chen demonstrated what he called a basic punch, his fist connecting with the training post. The impact resonated through the facility's superstructure. The post, designed to absorb energy discharges, buckled slightly under the force. That's approximately 400 pounds of force, the human explained calmly, as if he hadn't just damaged military-grade equipment with his bare hand. A trained human can generate significantly more. In the observation deck, Conversations had stopped. The Corvani engineers were already calculating the force required to damage their equipment in such a manner. The results were troubling. "Now, this is what we call a kick," Chen continued. His leg swept upward in an arc that seemed to defy several species' understanding of anatomy. The impact sent the already damaged post spinning. Stress fractures appeared along its surface. Roughly 800 pounds of force delivered in a concentrated area. In actual combat, this would be directed at an opponent's vulnerable points. Each species has different weak spots, of course, but there are generally consistent patterns. Commander Zeth Ka found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. The human's casual tone while discussing such violence was deeply unsettling. More concerning was the clear indication that humans had studied the anatomy of other species, specifically for combat purposes. "Sergeant," came a voice from another section of the observation deck. Major Crix Val, a senior tactical officer, had activated his comm unit. "These demonstrations are interesting, but surely the primary value would be against other humans. Most galactic defense personnel are equipped with battle armor that would negate such attacks." The human paused in his movements. Even from the observation deck, they could see him smile. It was not a pleasant expression. "Major, with respect, that's a common misconception. May I have permission to demonstrate using more realistic force levels?" Silence fell over the observation deck. Force levels? The human had been holding back? "Sergeant," Commander Zeth Ka intervened carefully. "Perhaps you could explain the theoretical applications rather than—" "Commander, I understand the concern, but theory and practice are very different things. Trust me, I'll be careful with your equipment." There was something in the human's tone that made several officers uncomfortable. Not aggression exactly, but confidence that bordered on arrogance. The kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly what one was capable of. "Very well," Zeth Ka said after consulting with his senior staff. "Proceed with your demonstration, but please be mindful of safety protocols." The human nodded and moved to another training station. This one featured a standard interrogation table used for prisoner processing and documentation. It was constructed from military-grade materials, designed to be both functional and durable. In actual combat situations, Chen explained, environmental factors become weapons. Furniture, walls, equipment, everything can be utilized. He placed both hands on the table's surface, his stance again shifting into that predatory configuration. Sometimes you need to clear a space quickly. Sometimes you need to create a distraction. Sometimes you need to demonstrate that normal assumptions about capability don't apply. Without further warning, the human drove his fists downward onto the table's surface. The sound was unlike anything most of the observers had ever heard. Not the clean discharge of an energy weapon or the controlled explosion of conventional ordnance, but something raw and primitive that seemed to bypass rational thought and trigger deeper, more ancient responses. The table split down the middle, its reinforced surface cracking like an eggshell. Pieces of polymer and metal scattered across the training area floor. Where there had been a solid, functional piece of military furniture, there was now wreckage. The training drone's sensors went haywire, their readings spiking beyond normal parameters. In the observation deck, emergency alerts began flashing as the facility's structural monitors registered the impact. Approximately 1,200 pounds of force, distributed across multiple contact points, Chen said conversationally, examining his hands for injury and finding none. Standard battle armor would reduce the effectiveness somewhat, but the real value isn't in the initial strike. It's in what happens after your opponent realizes their assumptions about human limitations were incorrect. Major Crix Val's species communicated partly through color changes in their skin, and right now his hide was cycling through patterns that indicated severe distress. "Sergeant, did you just destroy that furniture with your bare hands?" "Yes, sir." "That table was rated to support 2 tons of equipment." "Yes, sir." The simple acknowledgments were somehow more disturbing than elaborate explanations would have been. The humans spoke as if destroying military furniture through brute force was a routine occurrence. Commander Zeth Ka realized that the other species in the observation deck were looking at him expectantly. As senior officer, he needed to respond to what they had witnessed. The problem was that he wasn't entirely sure what they had witnessed. "Sergeant Chen," he said carefully, "what you've demonstrated appears to exceed the normal parameters for your species' documented physical capabilities." The human looked up at the observation deck, and even at this distance, Zeth Ka could see something unsettling in his expression. Not hostility, but a kind of patient amusement that suggested they were only beginning to understand what humans were capable of. "Commander, with respect, your documentation might be incomplete. Human physical capabilities vary significantly based on training, experience, and situation. What you've seen today represents fairly standard performance for a trained combatant." Standard performance? Lieutenant Vex Rowe had forgotten to deactivate his comm unit, and his question carried clearly through the facility's speakers. "Yes, Lieutenant. Standard. There are humans who can perform significantly better than what you've observed today." The silence that followed that statement stretched uncomfortably long. In the observation deck, officers from a dozen different species tried to process the implications of what they had heard. If this was standard performance, what did optimal performance look like? And perhaps more importantly, why had humans been so reluctant to discuss their close-quarters combat capabilities in detail? "Sergeant," Commander Zeth Ka said slowly, "I think we may need to extend this demonstration." "Of course, Commander. I'm at your disposal." The human began clearing debris from the training area, moving pieces of the destroyed table with casual efficiency. His movements remained fluid and controlled, showing no signs of fatigue or strain from his previous demonstration. As he worked, several officers in the observation deck were frantically consulting their datapads, cross-referencing human physiological data with what they had just witnessed. The discrepancies were troubling. Either their information about human capabilities was woefully incomplete, or they had just observed something that shouldn't have been possible. "Commander," Major Crixval said quietly, ensuring his comm was deactivated, "I recommend we request additional human documentation regarding their physical capabilities. If what we've seen represents normal performance parameters..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. If humans could routinely destroy military equipment with their bare hands, it raised significant questions about current security protocols and threat assessments. In the training area below, Sergeant Chen finished clearing the debris and turned back toward the observation deck. His expression was patient, almost friendly, but there was something in his stance that suggested they had only scratched the surface of what he was prepared to demonstrate. "Ready for the next demonstration whenever you are, Commander." The training facility's environmental systems struggled to clear the air of polymer dust and metal fragments. Outside, the station's normal operations continued, unaware that everything they thought they knew about their human allies was about to be reconsidered. Commander Zeth Ka looked at his assembled officers, recognizing the same mixture of fascination and concern in their expressions. They had requested a simple demonstration of human combat techniques. Instead, they had stumbled onto something much more significant. The question now was whether they were prepared for what they might learn next. The emergency consultation lasted 20 minutes. During that time, Sergeant Chen waited patiently in the training area, performing what appeared to be maintenance stretches. The casual nature of his movements after what he had just demonstrated created an unsettling contrast that wasn't lost on the observation deck's occupants. Commander Zeth Ka returned from the secure conference room with authorization for an extended demonstration session. More importantly, he carried new orders from Fleet Command. Someone higher up the chain wanted detailed documentation of human combat capabilities, and they wanted it immediately. "Sergeant Chen." The commander activated the communication system. We've been authorized to extend today's session. Fleet Command has expressed interest in a more comprehensive demonstration. The human looked up toward the observation deck, and again that disturbing smile appeared. How comprehensive, Commander? Assume we know nothing about human close-quarters combat. Start from the beginning. Understood, though I should mention, a truly comprehensive demonstration would require some additional equipment and perhaps different safety protocols. Major Crixval leaned toward his comm unit. What kind of equipment, Sergeant? Well, Major, what you've seen so far represents unarmed combat against inanimate objects. Human combat techniques were developed primarily for use against other humans, but they're adaptable. Different species present different challenges and opportunities. The matter-of-fact way the human discussed combating other species sent another wave of discomfort through the observation deck. Lieutenant Vex Rowe was rapidly taking notes, though he wasn't entirely sure what kind of report he would file about this session. Perhaps we could start with more detailed explanations of what we've already observed, suggested Dr. Thexna, the station's xenobiology specialist. The force generation you demonstrated exceeds our calculated parameters for human physiology. Chen nodded approvingly. Good question, Doctor. Human muscle structure is different from most species in the Galactic Defense Alliance. We're what you might call over-engineered for our standard environment. He moved to the center of the training area, his posture shifting into a teaching mode that somehow seemed more unsettling than his combat stance. Human evolution occurred under high-gravity conditions with significant environmental pressures. Our bone density is approximately 30% higher than the galactic average. Our muscle fiber composition includes a higher percentage of fast twitch fibers designed for explosive movement. And our nervous system operates on a different principle than most species. Different how? Dr. Thexna was leaning forward, genuinely curious now. Most species evolved for efficiency. Humans evolved for survival in hostile environments. Our pain response can be overridden. Our strength output can be increased beyond normal parameters when threatened. We call it adrenaline response, and it's automatic. Chen demonstrated by performing a vertical jump that cleared nearly his own height. The landing produced another impact that registered on the facility's sensors. Under normal conditions, a human uses approximately 60% of their available muscle strength, safety limitation built into our nervous system to prevent tissue damage. Under threat conditions, those limitations can be bypassed. Bypassed how? Commander Zethkov found himself asking. Consciously, with training. Unconsciously, when survival mechanisms activate. The demonstration you observed earlier was performed under normal conditions. Would you like to see the difference? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Several officers exchanged glances, uncertain whether they actually wanted to know the answer. Sergeant, Dr. Thexna said carefully, are you suggesting that your earlier demonstration represented limited human capability? Doctor, I'm stating it directly. What you observed was a casual demonstration by a trained human operating under normal conditions. Combat effectiveness increases significantly under actual threat scenarios. Major Crixval was consulting his tactical assessments, trying to reconcile what he was hearing with established protocols. Sergeant, current galactic defense engagement protocols assume certain performance parameters for different species. If human capabilities exceed those parameters, Major, I suspect your protocols may need adjustment. Would you like me to demonstrate enhanced performance, or would you prefer to continue with theoretical discussion? The observation deck had grown crowded. Word was spreading throughout the station, and off-duty personnel were finding reasons to observe the session. The implications of what was being discussed were becoming clear to anyone with military experience. Demonstrate, Commander Zethkov said quietly, but safely. Chen nodded and moved to another training station. This one featured a combat simulation post designed for heavy weapon practice. The device was anchored to the floor with reinforced mounting systems and built to absorb impacts from vehicle-mounted weapons. "This will require some preparation," the human said. His entire demeanor was changing, becoming more focused, more intense. "I need to shift my physiological state to combat readiness. This is not something we do casually." He began a series of breathing exercises, his movements becoming more controlled and deliberate. The casual, friendly instructor was disappearing, replaced by something that triggered instinctive alarm responses in multiple species. "Sergeant," Dr. Thek's Na's voice carried a note of concern, "are you inducing the adrenaline response artificially?" "Among other things, Doctor. Humans can consciously access most of our emergency physiological responses with proper training: increased heart rate, enhanced oxygen delivery, pain suppression, strength amplification. It's a trainable skill." The human's appearance was changing. His skin tone shifted slightly as blood flow patterns altered. His movements became more fluid and predatory. Most unsettling, his expression became completely emotionless, as if the personality they had been interacting with had stepped aside to make room for something else. "Ready?" Chen announced, but his voice had changed. Flatter, more mechanical. He approached the heavy weapon training post, paused for a moment to assess the target, and struck. The impact wasn't just louder than his previous demonstrations. It was qualitatively different, producing a sound that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the chest cavity. The massive training post, designed to absorb artillery impacts, rocked on its reinforced foundation. But Chen wasn't finished. His strikes came in rapid succession, each impact precisely placed and devastatingly effective. The observation deck's sensors registered force levels that exceeded the ratings for most handheld weapons. Within 30 seconds, the training post had been reduced to twisted metal and scattered components. Where there had been a piece of equipment designed to last decades under heavy use, there was now wreckage. The human stepped back from the destruction, his breathing controlled, and even despite the incredible expenditure of energy. His physiological state began returning to normal, but the transformation was gradual and somehow more disturbing than the demonstration itself. "Questions?" Chen asked, and his personality seemed to fully return with that single word. The observation deck was silent. Emergency protocols were flashing on multiple displays as the facility's systems tried to process what they had recorded. Several officers were frantically consulting their manuals, searching for appropriate response procedures. "Sergeant," Commander Zethka's voice was carefully controlled, "what we just observed represents enhanced human capability." "Yes, sir. Though I should clarify that this demonstration was still somewhat restrained. Actual combat scenarios involve additional variables that can further amplify human performance." "Additional variables?" Major Crick's Val had given up trying to reconcile this with his tactical assessments. "Threat response amplifies all human systems, not just strength. Reaction time decreases significantly, pain tolerance increases, cognitive function shifts to focus on survival and threat elimination. Humans under extreme threat can perform feats that exceed even their own normal enhanced capabilities." Dr. Thexna was reviewing his readings with obvious distress. "Sergeant, our medical assessment suggests such performance should cause significant tissue damage to human physiology." "It does, Doctor. That's why we train extensively to minimize the damage and why such performance is reserved for genuine threats. But the human body can sustain considerable damage and continue functioning. We're designed for survival, not efficiency." The implications were staggering. Every species in the Galactic Defense Alliance had evolved optimization strategies that maximized efficiency and minimized energy expenditure. Humans appeared to have evolved for the opposite approach, maximum capability regardless of cost. "Commander," Lieutenant Vex Rowe said quietly, "I believe we need to reconsider our current security assessments." Before Zeth Ka could respond, the facility's general alarm began sounding. Not the training exercise alert, but the real emergency signal that indicated immediate danger to the station. All personnel, this is Central Command. We have detected incoming hostile vessels. All combat personnel report to stations immediately. This is not a drill. The observation deck erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to their assignments. Through it all, Sergeant Chen remained in the training area, calmly observing the activity around him. Commander Zeth Ka paused at the exit. "Sergeant, report to your station." "Commander, with respect, my station is wherever you need human combat capabilities. Given what we've just discussed, I suggest that might be more valuable than you previously realized." The commander looked at the destroyed equipment scattered around the training area, then at the human who had created that destruction with his bare hands. Outside, the station's defensive systems were coming online as an unknown threat approached. "Report to the command center," Zeth Ka ordered. "I suspect we're about to learn more about practical applications of human combat techniques." As the observation deck cleared, emergency lighting activated throughout the facility. The training session was over, but its lessons were about to be applied in ways none of them had expected. The destroyed furniture and equipment remained in the training area as evidence of what they had witnessed. But more importantly, they now carried the knowledge that humanity's role in the Galactic Defense Alliance was based on fundamentally incomplete information. In the command center, tactical displays were already showing the approaching enemy formation. The coming engagement would test human capabilities in ways that no demonstration could replicate. And for the first time since the Alliance had been formed, the alien officers were beginning to understand why humans had been so confident about their combat effectiveness. The question was whether that understanding had come soon enough. The command center buzzed with controlled tension as tactical displays showed the approaching threat. 6 vessels of unknown configuration had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their energy signatures unlike anything in galactic defense databases. Commander Zeth Ka studied the readouts while his officers coordinated defensive preparations. The enemy ships were advancing steadily, ignoring all communication attempts. Their technology appeared sophisticated, but their tactical approach was puzzling. They were moving directly toward the station without any apparent strategy beyond brute force advancement. "Commander," Lieutenant Vex Rowe reported from his sensor station. "The hostile vessels are maintaining formation, but not responding to any standard protocols. Energy readings suggest significant shielding and weapons capacity." "Defensive status?" Zeth Ka asked. "All weapon systems online, shields at maximum. However, Commander, preliminary scans suggest these vessels may outclass our defensive capabilities." Sergeant Chen stood at an auxiliary station, quietly observing the tactical situation. Unlike the other personnel in the command center, he appeared completely calm, almost relaxed despite the approaching threat. "Sergeant," the commander addressed him, "your assessment of the situation." Chen studied the tactical display for several moments before responding. "Commander, based on their approach vector and formation, these aren't military vessels in the conventional sense. The formation suggests raiders or pirates, probably looking for easy targets. They're expecting minimal resistance." Major Crix Val looked up from his defense coordination console. "Sergeant, our analysis suggests these vessels possess superior firepower. How do you define minimal resistance?" The human smiled, and once again it carried undertones that made several officers uncomfortable. "Major, superior firepower assumes you're fighting the kind of engagement they expect. Pirates don't anticipate having to board defended positions. They expect surrender or quick victory." "And if they attempt to board the station?" Dr. Thexna asked from his emergency medical station. "Then they'll learn why humans developed close-quarters combat techniques in the first place." The enemy formation continued its approach, and long-range scans revealed more troubling details. The vessels were heavily armed and shielded, designed for ship-to-ship combat against standard galactic defense forces. In a conventional engagement, the station's chances were marginal at best. "Commander," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel." On screen, the display showed a being that resembled a cross between a reptile and an insect, with multiple arms and what appeared to be natural armor plating. When it spoke, the translation system rendered its words in standard galactic. "Defensive installation. You will surrender immediately. Resistance is futile. We require your supplies and personnel for our operations. Compliance will result in minimal casualties." Commander Zeth Ka stepped forward. "This is Commander Zeth Ka of Galactic Defense Station Gamma 7. Withdraw immediately or face defensive action." The alien's laughter was harsh and grating. "Commander, your station possesses minimal defensive capability. Our scans indicate standard galactic defense armaments. You cannot threaten vessels of our configuration. Surrender now, or we will take what we require by force." The transmission ended, and the enemy vessels resumed their advance. "Options?" Zeth Ka asked his tactical staff. "Limited, sir," Major Crix Val replied. "Our defensive weapons can engage them, but their shielding appears capable of absorbing significant punishment. We might damage 1 or 2 vessels before being overwhelmed." "Time to engagement range?" 15 minutes at their current speed. Sergeant Chen approached the command console. "Commander requests permission to implement alternative defensive preparations." "Explain." "These raiders are expecting conventional resistance. They're prepared for energy weapon exchanges and defensive shields. They're not prepared for human defensive techniques." The command center staff exchanged glances. After the morning's demonstration, they were beginning to understand that human techniques often differed significantly from standard approaches. "What do you recommend, Sergeant?" "Allow them to approach. Let them believe they're facing minimal resistance. Then introduce variables they haven't planned for." "You're suggesting we allow them to board the station?" "Commander, I'm suggesting we invite them to board the station. There's a difference." Major Crix Val was consulting his tactical manuals, searching for precedents. "Sergeant, standard doctrine calls for preventing boarding actions, not encouraging them." "Major, standard doctrine assumes your enemy knows your capabilities. These raiders have planned for conventional defense. They haven't planned for humans." Commander Zeth Ka considered the suggestion. It violated every conventional military principle, but then again, nothing about human military methods followed conventional principles. "Explain your reasoning." Chen moved to the tactical display, highlighting the enemy formation. 6 vessels, probably carrying boarding parties of 20 to 30 each. Say 150 total combatants, expecting minimal resistance from station personnel who they assume will surrender rather than fight. He manipulated the display to show the station's interior layout. Once they're aboard, their advantages disappear. Their superior technology becomes irrelevant. Their numerical advantage becomes manageable, and they discover that their assumptions about resistance were incomplete. "Manageable how?" Dr. Thexna asked. "Doctor, this morning I demonstrated human capability against inanimate objects under controlled conditions. Combat against actual threats involves different parameters entirely." The implications were sobering. If Chen's earlier demonstrations represented casual capability, what would actual combat look like? "Commander," Lieutenant Vex Rowe interrupted, "the enemy vessels are entering weapons range." "Defensive positions," Zeth Ka ordered. "Sergeant Chen, prepare whatever alternative defensive measures you consider appropriate." The human nodded and activated his personal communicator. "Chen to all human personnel. Implement Protocol 7 immediately. Full authorization granted." Across the station, the 12 humans assigned to the exchange program received the message. Their responses were immediate and professional, but several alien personnel noted that the humans' demeanor changed dramatically. The casual, friendly attitudes disappeared, replaced by something that registered as predatory alertness. "Protocol 7?" Commander Zeth Ka inquired. Human combat doctrine, Commander. Designed for situations where conventional approaches are insufficient. The first enemy weapon impacts struck the station's shields, sending vibrations through the superstructure. The shields held, but energy readings showed they were being systematically tested for weaknesses. "They're probing our defenses," Major Crixval reported. "Standard pirate technique. Find the weak points before committing to full assault." "Let them," Chen said quietly. "The longer they spend analyzing our conventional defenses, the more confident they become about boarding." The assault continued for several minutes, with the enemy vessels methodically testing different sections of the station's shielding. Their approach was professional and thorough, indicating significant experience with this type of operation. "Commander," communications reported, "receiving another transmission from the enemy." The same alien leader appeared on screen, but its tone was more aggressive now. "Your shields are adequate but not exceptional. We have identified weakness patterns. Surrender now, or we will breach your defenses and take what we require. Your resistance serves no purpose." "Our response?" Lieutenant Vex Rowe asked. Chen stepped forward. "Commander, request permission to respond directly." Zethka nodded, curious about how a human would handle diplomatic contact with hostile forces. "Raider vessel," Chen addressed the screen with perfect calm. "This is Sergeant Chen, representing human interests aboard this station. Be advised that resistance capabilities have been underestimated in your tactical assessment." The alien leader's expression showed confusion and perhaps amusement. "Human? We are familiar with your species. Adequate technology, minimal physical capability, tendency toward surrender when faced with superior force. You do not alter our assessment." Chen's smile was genuinely terrifying. "In that case, you're welcome to proceed with boarding operations." The transmission ended with the alien leader appearing distinctly puzzled by the response. "Sergeant," Commander Zethka said carefully, "you just invited them to board." "Yes, sir. They're raiders, Commander. They want easy victories. The harder we fight conventionally, the more likely they are to simply destroy the station from range. But if we appear to be easy targets, they'll board to take prisoners and supplies." "Exactly. And once they're aboard, we demonstrate why human close-quarters combat techniques weren't developed for sport." The enemy weapons stopped firing. Long-range sensors showed boarding craft launching from the raider vessels. 6 ships, 8 boarding craft, exactly as Chen had predicted. "All station personnel," Commander Zethka announced over the general communication system. "Prepare for boarding action. Implement emergency protocols." Throughout the station, alien personnel took defensive positions and prepared for what they expected to be a conventional boarding engagement. The humans, however, were implementing very different preparations. "Commander," Chen said as he checked his equipment, "I recommend you observe the boarding action from secure locations. This is going to be educational, but you might want to record everything for later analysis." "Why?" "Because Fleet Command is going to want detailed documentation of how humans handle actual combat situations, and because some of your officers still seem to think this morning's demonstration was impressive." The first boarding craft attached to the station's hull with metallic clangs that resonated through the corridors. Cutting beams began working on the outer airlock seals. In the command center, tactical displays showed the boarding party's progress. The raiders were following standard procedures: secure the entry points, advance systematically, overwhelm resistance through superior numbers and firepower. They were about to discover why humans had earned their reputation as the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and why their close-quarters combat techniques had been developed out of necessity rather than choice. The first airlock breached, and armed raiders began pouring into the station's corridors. They advanced confidently, energy weapons ready, expecting to face panicked civilian personnel and minimal security forces. Instead, they encountered 12 humans who had spent months learning the layout of every corridor, vent, and maintenance space on the station. Humans who had been waiting their entire military careers for someone to make the mistake of fighting them in close quarters. The raiders' confident advance lasted approximately 30 seconds. What followed would be studied in military academies for decades, analyzed by tactical specialists, and used to completely revise engagement protocols for human integrated forces. The screaming started almost immediately, not from the humans. In the command center, Commander Zethka and his staff watched their tactical displays with growing amazement and horror. The boarding parties, which had advanced systematically into the station, were being systematically eliminated by forces that barely registered on sensors. "What exactly are we observing?" Dr. Thexna asked, watching the tactical display show raider positions disappearing one by one. Through the station's internal communications, they could hear fragments of what was happening. Raiders shouting in panic, the sounds of energy weapons firing wildly, and underneath it all, the quiet efficiency of humans applying their combat techniques against live targets. The engagement lasted 12 minutes. When it ended, the boarding parties had been completely neutralized, and the human personnel were already securing the entry points. Sergeant Chen's voice came over the communication system, perfectly calm and professional. "Command Center, this is Chen. Boarding threat eliminated. Station secure. Ready for follow-up operations against enemy vessels." Commander Zethka realized he was staring at the tactical display in disbelief. "Sergeant, report to the command center immediately." When Chen arrived, he appeared completely unchanged from the beginning of the engagement. No signs of fatigue, no indication of stress, no evidence that he had just participated in combat that eliminated over 100 enemy combatants. "Questions, Commander?" "How?" Chen consulted his datapad briefly. "Standard human small unit tactics, modified for shipboard environment. The raiders made several tactical errors, primarily assuming that numerical superiority would compensate for unfamiliarity with the operational environment." "Sergeant," Major Crixval said slowly, "our sensors barely registered the engagement. How did 12 humans eliminate 6 boarding parties?" "Major, humans developed close-quarters combat for use against other humans. Applying those techniques against species not adapted for such combat creates significant tactical advantages. The raiders were equipped for conventional boarding actions, not human-style combat." "And the enemy vessels?" "Still in position, probably wondering why their boarding parties haven't reported success. I recommend we inform them that their tactical assessment was incomplete." Commander Zethka looked around the command center at his staff. Every officer present was staring at Chen with expressions that mixed respect, amazement, and considerable unease. "Communications. Open a channel to the enemy formation." The alien leader appeared on screen again, but its confidence was noticeably reduced. "Defensive station, our boarding parties have not reported. Respond immediately." Chen stepped into view of the communication pickup. "Raider vessel, this is Sergeant Chen. Your boarding parties encountered human defensive techniques. The engagement did not proceed as you anticipated. What is the status of our personnel?" "They have been neutralized. Your tactical assessment of human capabilities was insufficient for this operation. I recommend immediate withdrawal." The alien's expressions cycled through several emotions before settling on something that might have been fear. "This is not possible. Our forces were superior in number and equipment. Nevertheless, they have been eliminated. You now face a choice. Withdraw immediately, or discover whether human capabilities extend beyond close-quarters combat." The transmission ended abruptly. Long-range sensors showed the enemy vessels beginning to move, but not in attack formation. They were retreating. "Sergeant," Dr. Thexna said quietly, "what would have happened if they had chosen to continue the engagement?" Chen's smile was genuinely friendly for the first time since the crisis began. "Doctor, humans have been preparing for that scenario for decades. I think they made the correct choice." Commander Zeth Ka watched the enemy formation disappear into hyperspace, then turned to address his staff. I want complete documentation of today's events prepared for Fleet Command immediately, and I want a full review of our assessments of human military capabilities. Should we request additional human personnel for station defense? Lieutenant Vex Rowe asked. Lieutenant, I think we should request a complete re-evaluation of how humans are integrated into galactic defense operations. Today's demonstration suggests we've been significantly underutilizing their capabilities. Sergeant Chen gathered his equipment and prepared to return to his duties. As he reached the command center exit, Commander Zeth Ka called after him. Sergeant, one final question. This morning, when you requested permission to demonstrate enhanced human combat capability, was that really enhanced performance? The human paused and considered the question seriously. Commander, this morning I demonstrated human techniques against inanimate objects under controlled conditions. This afternoon we applied those techniques against live threats in an actual combat environment. That's not an answer. Commander, what you observed this afternoon was 12 humans applying standard combat procedures against an enemy that wasn't prepared for human capabilities. Enhanced performance would involve additional variables that I sincerely hope you never have occasion to witness. The command center fell silent as the implications of that statement settled over the assembled officers. Outside, the station's normal operations resumed. Damage control teams repaired the boarding damage, security personnel processed the aftermath of the engagement, and administrative staff prepared the required reports. But throughout the station, every non-human officer was reconsidering everything they thought they knew about their human allies. The demonstration had been educational in ways none of them had expected. In his final report, Commander Zeth Ka would recommend fundamental changes to galactic defense protocols regarding human integration. His conclusions would influence military doctrine for generations, but the most significant impact was simpler and more immediate. No one would ever again make the mistake of assuming they understood human capabilities based on casual observation. The morning's training demonstration had answered one question and raised dozens of others. The afternoon's combat engagement had provided some answers while revealing how much they still didn't understand about the species they had allied with. What they did understand was that humans were far more formidable allies than anyone had realized and significantly more dangerous enemies than anyone wanted to contemplate. The request for a melee demonstration had been satisfied. The results would reshape galactic military thinking for decades to come.